They were given the choice to remain houseless, or if they wished, to be rehoused in the same form and shape as they had had. Normally, they must nonetheless remain in Aman. Therefore, if they dwelt in Middle-earth, their bereavement of friends and kin, and the bereavement of these, was not amended. Death was not wholly healed. Well met, my friends, Yoistin here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will be talking about an interesting piece of Tolkien's works, the subject of reincarnation, rebirth, and resurrection, and how it all works. Primarily, we will be looking at elves in this video, but a few others will be regarded as well. Most of this lore comes from the books Morgoth's Ring, The Peoples of Middle-earth, and the new book The Nature of Middle-earth. I will link related articles and videos, such as what happens in the afterlife in Tolkien's works, in the description and cards for more information, as this might end up being a very confusing video. My friends, thank you all so much for being here. Let's head back into Middle-earth together and begin our tale. Before we look at the different renditions Tolkien mused on concerning reincarnation, let's clarify a few vocab words and philosophical premises that will help us along. Fear is the Quenya name for spirits, and Hror means bodies. Now, as a premise for life in Arda, especially for elves, the Fear, spirits, or what one could even equate to minds, have to perfectly match up with Hror, or bodies. Tolkien has an interesting take on mind-body dualism in his works, which is the problem concerning how the two interact and if they are separable. And Tolkien's answer is that they are different but fit perfectly together. Although, as Finrod states in his conversation with the woman Andraith about the metaphysics of men and elves, it is said the spirits of elves will eventually overcome their own bodies in Middle-earth, for Melkor had marred the world and changed things. With that premise in mind, let's go back to our original question of how does reincarnation work in Arda, before I get lost in the many metaphysical and philosophical conundrums in this dialogue, which I could potentially explore in future videos. Now, that dialogue between Finrod, an elf, and Andraith of the race of men concerns how they view these metaphysics from their own frames, but surely there were more complexities of which they knew not, for there are notes concerning a dialogue between Manwë and Eru that involved reincarnation, and Tolkien even toyed with a few ideas about reincarnation, one of which we'll explore in a second. But when a Hrora, a body, is killed, an elf's spirit goes to the halls of Mandos and awaits reincarnation, even as their physical body perishes. An early notion that Tolkien had is that a houseless Fëa would be reborn to different parents in a new body, growing into this other body. But there was a fundamental issue with that, for that would mean bodies were not strictly made to fit their spirits, which Tolkien did not want. Thus, the idea of rebirth, as humans might see it, was made actually impossible for elves, as mentioned in Morgoth's Ring and supported by the nature of Middle-earth, as Fear and Hror were meant for each other, and could not be mixed with different combinations. Different rules apply with the Ainur, the Maiar, and the Valar, but we'll get to them in a bit. It is said after the death of Míriel, the wife of Finwë and mother of Fëanor, Manwë appealed to Eru Ilúvatar for counsel directly, and even the music of the Ainur had not had a pre-visioned solution for the many houseless elves who had lost their bodies due to the impacts of Melkor. In this conversation, it was said a Fëa would retain memory of its Hrora so vividly that an identical body could be remade with the memory of the spirit. Thus, that would actually be the solution Tolkien landed on for this question for the elves, and while it would be pardonable for some elves to remain houseless if they wished, for perhaps a certain elf experienced many sorrows in their Hrora, others would have their exact bodies remade for them by the Valar, with the vivid memories the spirits had of their bodies. Now, the Valar could choose when to remake bodies for the elves, and it would be apparent with the elves who were explicitly reincarnated or meant to be, that the Valar would remake some elves sooner than others. Furthermore, reincarnated elves were typically meant to stay in Aman, and not pass back to mortal lands and the people they knew there. Finrod Felagund, who himself wondered at the nature of life and death for both elves and men in his conversation with Andraith, would be slain, and he would die defending his friend Beren, son of Barahir. For his actions and good nature in life, Finrod would be reincarnated rather fast, and thus he would live the rest of the days of Arda in Aman with his father Finarfin and love Amarië, with both his Fëa and Hrora intact. Another elf who was slain and brought back would be Luthien, daughter of Thingol and Melion, and what's more, her husband Beren would be the only man to be reincarnated in such a way, for both perished in their first lives, and Luthien moved Mandos to pity, and in this one case, the wisdom of Manwë bestowed to him by Eru would actually allow for the re-embodiment of Beren's soul to his body, and the same for Luthien, and they would be sent back to Middle-earth together to live mortal lives. Of course, we also have Glorfindel, who perished to save refugees from Gondolin, including Eärendil, Tuor, and Idril, and he died fighting a Balrog of Morgoth. But because of his actions in life and his wisdom, he would be reincarnated and have great power in his new body, and he would live in Valinor for a time before being sent back to Middle-earth during the Second Age. Now, it was foretold that, at the end of days, Feanor would surrender the Silmarils after the Dagor Dagorath and death of Morgoth, and likely he would have to be re-embodied to do this. So though his spirit remained long in the halls of Mandos for his many ill deeds in life, his fate, if this was truly it, would likely see him reincarnated by the Valar anyway. It is said also in the Dagor Dagorath that Turin would be brought back to kill Morgoth. I'm not exactly sure how all of this would happen and how resurrections concerning the Dagor Dagorath would happen, but because it was the end of days, perhaps rules were broken, and men, elves, dwarves, and many others were brought back into their bodies for this final moment. Now, before we move on to two anomalies on the subject of reincarnation, let's talk about the dwarves for a second. It was believed by some dwarves that each Durin was a reincarnation of Durin I, the Deathless, or that perhaps he went to sleep only to be reawakened once more. I can't speak too much to this as my sources here today don't really speak about dwarven reincarnation, but unless perhaps Aule the Smith was somehow involved with remaking the body of Durin each time and placing him in slumber in Middle-earth, I find it rather unlikely dwarves were actually reincarnated, in the same way as elves at least, or put to sleep to be once more awakened. To finish off our video on reincarnation in Tolkien's works, let's look at the two oddities in the subject, Gandalf and Sauron. As I mentioned earlier, the rules for the Maiar and Valar must be different, for they even each have a different kind of spirit. Rather than possessing a Fea, an Ainu possesses what's called an Eala, which means being, or Ealar in the plural, which are spirits that do not require bodies to house them. So perhaps their process of reincarnation was meant to be quite different. Let's start with Gandalf, who died atop Celebdil in his fight with the Balrog. He could not have been reincarnated in the same way as elves, for Gwaihir would bring him from the top of the mountain to Lothlorien to be recloaked in white. I must imagine his spirit was sent back to his wounded body. Now, in the history of Sauron, he was disembodied 3 times. Once during the downfall of Numenor, again when Isildur cut the ring from his finger, and finally when the One Ring was destroyed and Barad-dûr fell. With the first 2 instances, his spirit persisted with the One Ring, and his spirit was bound to it. However, how did he get his physical body back after the downfall of Numenor, and at the end of the Third Age, assuming he did in fact have a body during the Lord of the Rings? I must imagine that he created bodies that could not shapeshift anymore for himself, and no Vala would have done this for him, so he would have had to do it himself. I'm not sure. But with all of this lore, we can see just how attached elven spirits and bodies were to this world, while men got to go beyond these circles of the world, and leave behind their sorrows forever. Thus, we come to the end of our discussion on reincarnation in Arda. From this tale, we see that regardless of our fates, we must make the most out of this life, just like the heroes in our stories did. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this different kind of lore video today. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. And to be honest, I doubt Tolkienian metaphysics will be that popular on YouTube, so any support will greatly help. Let me know your thoughts, questions, additions, corrections, and anything else I might have missed in the comments below. This is such a fascinating topic for a philosophy nerd like me, and I'm happy Tolkien got into a lot of detail in his notes about this. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons, Adrian de la Tour, Chris Ortner, Kyle Wetzel, Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Mark Kralik, Blair Scout, and Tobias Goldner, Merton, John Hume, Reggie93, Jennifer Wood, Sam McBee, Matt Sabach, Quantum Catalyst, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Ben Gardner, Kondar, and Reese Jenkins. And thank you so much to all of our patrons, it means a lot. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with an updated epic character history on Legolas Greenleaf. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.